podcast series is part of a mission of the New York Intellectual Property Law Association, NYI-PLA Past Presidents Committee, to preserve a snippet of the history of our association through the eyes of our past presidents, and to provide continuity for our century-old association values and traditions for future NYI-PLA leaders. I'm Rob Rando, the current president of NYI-PLA for the 2023-2024 term. And today, we are pleased to have with us Kathleen McCarthy. She was the 97th president of the NYI-PLA during the 2019-2020 term. And Katie, before we begin with the questions, is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's a great idea. And it gave me a little walk down memory lane, because even though 2019, 2020 wasn't that long ago, I think all of us have kind of stuck that time frame in some time capsule in our minds that we can't access anymore.
That's a great description. You're right. But just thinking about it, you don't want to even say the word, right?
Right, exactly. But yeah, so I did take a look back at the naive things I wrote in 2019 and the more I don't know, I guess the less naive things I wrote in 2020. But it was fun to take a look back, and it's also like a testament to the organization, I think, how we pulled through.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I'm sure you'll tell us a lot more about that as we go along. So Katie, please tell us a little about who you are and where you are in your career today.
I am a partner at King & Spalding in the New York office on the intellectual property team. And I would say I'm kind of trademarks is my jam, but I also do some copyright. I've had, a smattering of patent cases, usually design patent, a lot of advertising work, and a lot of things that I would call just involve internet, social media policies, platform liability issues, that sort of thing. So I've been here at King & Spalding. I think in April, it'll be my 17th year here. And before that, I was at IP Boutiques for a couple of years. And I started out in practice at a general practice firm before saying, wait a second, I think there's something more interesting I can work on.
And so, well, before I get to the next question, I'm so happy that you said it the way you said it, trademark is my jam. It makes me feel like we're so young.
Yeah.
At least for the moment.
Right.
I should say I feel so young, and you are young. So how did you first become aware of NYI-PLA?
I was working at an IP boutique in 1990, and they had purchased tickets to the Judges Dinner. And somebody said, hey, are you interested in going to this dinner? I knew nothing really about the association at the time. It was New York Patent Law Association. So it wasn't, at least in name, all that relevant to my practice at the time, which was clearly trademarks. But yeah, and I went to the dinner in 1990, and I still have it. Sometimes I call my husband a hoarder, but I will admit that I still have the dress that I wore in 1990.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure it fits, but I still have it. I still have it.
Well, that's interesting, because 90 was the first year that I attended. Yeah, I started practicing in 89, and maybe around the same time. And I have a memory myself of that first. But I mean, I don't know how you felt, but when I first walked into the Waldorf, it was kind of surrealistic, with the whole black tie thing and everything.
Yeah, it was. And there's an element when you go too as a young lawyer of just kind of like, do I have to talk to a judge? Is it like, it's kind of scary. It's a little bit scary. But then from there, from that firm, well, I don't know if you know this about me, but so that was March 1990. then in July 1990, I quit my job for a year-round, round-the-world travel.
Wow, I did not know that. I
Yeah.
love it.
So I did a backpack around the world. You used to be able to buy a plane ticket where as long as you went in the same direction, it was one price. So it was like New York, London. Then we were in Europe for a while, not flying, and then went to a kind of endless summer to Southeast Asia. And then after, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Hawaii, Los Angeles, New York. That was the itinerary. Um,
Wow.
I was, and then when I came back,
Oh, wait. Forget the rest of the interview. I want to hear all about around the world in 1 year. Okay,
around the
throwing
world,
out my questions.
there was no internet. There was no internet. There were no phones. I didn't have a phone. You could write a letter to me, care of a general post office, and I could pick it up. So I had told my family, if you want to write us and your mail by X date, send it to this general post office. You show up at the post office with your passport. They go in the back somewhere and they bring out your mail. It was fascinating.
Yeah,
Uh,
really.
and then the one thing was one timing thing we did wrong was we were supposed to go to Hong Kong, but we had timed it around Chinese New Year and it wasn't going to work. Like we weren't going to find, I can't remember if it was we could get in, but then we couldn't get out for like 3 weeks, or if it was we couldn't get in, so it was going to take away from our time in Australia. So we decided not to go to Hong Kong and changed our itinerary a little bit. But I had told all these people to write me to the Hong Kong post office. So I sent a postcard to the Hong Kong post office from Thailand saying, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be there for my mail. Could you please forward it to Melbourne, Australia?
Really?
And I went to Melbourne and all my letters from Hong Kong were there.
Wow, I don't think the U.S. Postal Service could accomplish that today.
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, when I came back, right, I sent out one resume. Now I could have gone back to the same IP boutique that I worked at before, but there was something about coming back and sitting at the same desk before, that was a little bit,
Yeah, you've been around the world. You want to sit at the same desk? I mean, come on. No, I get it.
something a little bit different. And I wrote one resume and mailed it. And at the time, no cell phones. I remember my grandmother, it might have been the number that I put on. So my grandma, I went camping. My grandmother, when I came back from the camping trip, said, you have to call this nice man, David Kane, who got your resume and wants to talk to you. And so then I went to work at Kane, what was then Kane Dulcimer, in the like late summer of 1991. And David had already been president of the association at that point in time,
Yep.
and was just very encouraging of all the attorneys at the firm, not only to go to the judges' dinner, they would have a nice suite. You could bring your spouse or significant other, and you got involved. You went to. Do you remember when we had like nice luncheons at was it the Princeton Club? I can't
Yep.
remember where it
Yeah,
was.
that's right.
And there would be interesting topics of CLE, and then a nice like a chicken dinner kind of thing in the middle of
Yeah,
the day on a
yeah,
Friday.
yeah.
So I would go to those, and then I joined the trademark committee. I think at David's urging.
Mhm.
And those committee meetings always were interesting and varied in terms of sometimes we would have guest speakers where the chair of the committee would have, I remember Dale Sandali coming to some to talk about a Supreme Court case that she argued. It was always very interesting, depending, no matter what we were, whether we had guest speakers or we had this, that, or the other. And at some point, somebody asked me to be a co-chair on the trademark committee or chair of the trademark committee. So I did that for a little while. And then one thing I will say about the New York IP community, there's kind of like 6 degrees from NYIPLA, or however
Yeah,
you want to describe it.
yeah.
And sometimes it's like 6 degrees from different firms. But when I was at Kane Dulcimer, another trademark attorney who was there was Steve Quigley. And Steve Quigley was very involved with the NYPLA. He used to write the column about the trademark papers, the trademark papers in the bulletin. And so Steve was someone who I worked with back at Kane Dulcimer. We were on to different firms. And I got a call from him out of the blue at one point and said, I was on the board at the NYPLA and my term is up, and they're looking for like the token trademark person to be on the board. I mean, I didn't say it that way, but that was basically what it was. We need somebody on the board who, practices something other than, they're trying to keep the board a diverse approach, some in-house, some at firms, some with a focus on this type of technology, some with a focus on another type of technology, some with a trademark experience, some with copyright, whatever it is. It needs to be a diverse board. And so Steve said, would you be interested? And your first question when you get asked something like that is always like, how much time? It's like the
Right.
time commitment you're asking for. But in any event, I agreed to get on the board. And I don't know that I necessarily was surprised, but I was so what's the right word? I don't know. I so looked forward to going to the board meetings. The board meetings were interesting. The issues we were talking about were interesting. Everybody on the board was so collegial and nice, and sometimes we had debates. There were a lot of debates and a lot of, I mean, if you approach it with curiosity, right? I'm someone who's not really a patent attorney, but it was so interesting to me to hear people debating about, how the patent law has shifted over the years. And been a fairly big shift over the past years, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And all the work that was done to sort of vet and understand legislation and deal with Congress and just the opportunities presented were really really interesting and really unique, I think, to the organization. I mean, I remember having a meeting with Congressman Jeffries at one point,
Yep.
talking about copyright, small claims, and other issues, and all kinds of interesting stuff. So it definitely gave you all these opportunities to learn about things in your general area, but also kind of a little bit broader than your general area. And that's how I got on the board. And then I think one of the things that helps, right, is just somebody asks you to do something, you agree to do it.
Sure.
And
Well,
that's one of those things that sometimes I think I need to work on my no muscle a little bit more.
yeah, long ago, I gave up on even trying. I
Yeah,
don't know. And trust me, my wife reminds me of that every day. And she'll say to me, you're either a masochist or you must enjoy it.
right, right. So I probably skipped over like a lot of the questions and got,
Well, no, actually, I will say you've kind of addressed a couple of them already, and you touched on it, but maybe if you could tell me, what activities and roles that you engaged in early on as a member?
yeah, I think, well, early on, I helped write some things for the bulletin. I helped, I showed up at meetings. At the meetings, one of the things that I think, that like the committee meetings, trademark committee meetings, one of the things where it's really useful is to go into the room of your colleagues, like at different firms, and sort of say, I've got this issue that's kind of come up and I've been researching it a little bit, but has anyone else dealt with this? Like, how do you handle this? Like, does anyone else have a good um, resource for this? And I will say that, like, even to this day, so I still participate in the copyright committee and the trademark committee. Even to this day, I learn things from those committee meetings. Just recently on the copyright committee meeting, well, I was tasked to put together a presentation, not for the copyright committee, but for something else about AI and IP. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, I could do that, I guess, but I mean, gosh, I need some I need some background information. I need what are people talking, I mean, I see the
Sure.
cases that are filed, I know that kind of thing, but what else is going on with AI? And in the copyright committee, the co-chair had mentioned the podcast by New York Times reporter and the platformer. Um, I guess he's an author or maybe also a journalist. These journalists have this podcast called Hard Fork. And one thing I learned about hard fork is in technology, a term that you use where you have been working on a project, and it just doesn't work anymore. So you trash the whole thing and make a hard fork, change the path and try something else. And so they came up with this name hard fork because they feel like the tech industry as a whole is kind of making a hard fork, right? We're kind of looking at new different things
Yeah.
with AI. And we don't really know. We know kind of like some of the old stuff we're used to is probably not going to be useful anymore, but we don't really know what the new thing is we're embarking on. So I started listening to that all the time, which is way more relevant to my work life than or any part of my life than my other podcast that I used to listen to all the time, which is My Favorite Murder, which hopefully, maybe one of these days I'll be on Hard Fork, but I hope I'm never on My Favorite Murder.
No, that's one of the best things you could hope for, right?
And I never want to be on the front page of the New York Post. Those are my goals in life.
Or page 6, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh, so again, I think you've described it. But was there a time when you decided you want to assume a leadership role, or did it evolve over time?
It evolved over time. And I think I'm one of those people who, like, I'm interested, I'm curious, I show up, I ask questions, that's kind of what I do at these meetings. And then people would just ask me, do you want to, how about, would you like to be the chair? I'm like, oh, thank you. Yeah, great. Would you like to be on the board? Sure. So that's kind of how it happened. I don't think I had like a plan. And I probably do have plans, right? And I don't go through life without plans, but I'm not like a huge planner. I remember when I was having my second baby, the doctor was like, do you have a plan? Like, people have plans, right? And I was like, I plan to go to the hospital and I plan to leave with the baby. Like, whatever happens in the meantime, it's gonna happen. I don't know how much control I have over that. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
but
that's
that,
good self-awareness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not a huge planner, and I don't think, like, to the extent that I am aiming for certain things, I'm not really sure that I like campaign for them. My dad always wanted to be a judge, and he did all this campaigning, and I hated it. We used to have to go door to door and ring the doorbell and hand these little flyers about my dad. He would have made a great judge, but although I think he was probably a little too lenient as a parent. I don't know how that translates to being a good judge or not. But I hate campaigning. Like, that's not my thing. So I never really campaigned. I just showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then people asked me to do things, and I said, okay, I'll do it.
Well, you described how you became a committee chair and was asked to come on the board. Can you talk about your trajectory from being on the board to becoming president?
Yeah, that was I guess it was it was a similar thing. You know, I kind of showed up, I volunteered, I went to all the meetings. Um, I and there was a lot of stuff about the organization, I have to say, as long as I was involved with it, that I was like not aware, like and that it would be my first time where you're like, you have to be able, move to do this. Is somebody going to second the motion? Like all of that board kind of stuff was just like, wow, we really do this. We
Yeah. Well, the pseudo Robert's rules, right?
yeah, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. I had to read the bylaws and like uh, figure out how things work. And I didn't really know like how the ladder worked or how, the different roles come into play. I didn't know any of that until I was on the board. Um, and then I just, you know, showed up. Kind of when I was looking at my themes for the things that I wrote, that was my theme as a, well, not, it was part of my theme as president, was kind of outreach, right? Outreach. And then I had this quote from Aaron Sorkin, the screenwriter from, I think West Wing, maybe, and a couple of other shows.
Couple other things, yeah. Very,
Yeah,
very good screenwriter.
he said, decisions are made by those who show up. And so I was
I like that.
encouraging people to show up.
Yeah,
You can't really not participate in the process and then complain about the outcome. If you have, you know, concerns about how the law is going in any particular direction, show up and talk about them. And that's how, you get involved in the process. So that's probably my biggest advice, show up.
yeah, no, and I think you've kind of hit upon one of the great benefits of NYIPLA, because if you do show up, you have the opportunity to influence what's happening in the IP space um, at all three branches of the federal government, whether it's through the Amicus Briefs Committee, our Legislative Action Committee, and certainly, at the at the USPTO.
Right, right. And you get to participate in, there's so much going on, right, with AI, where there's the Copyright Office is looking into AI, the Trademark Office is looking into AI, and the patent side, they're looking into AI. And they're asking questions of the community, what should we be thinking about ownership of output from AI? What should we be thinking about, um, protecting rights when materials are used to train AI? All of these things. Um, that's another thing as I was looking back, like trying to jog my memory about what I was talking about. When you think, and you would be like exactly the same as me, when you think about all that has happened in the IP field and continues to happen and change over the 30 some years we've been involved, it's really incredible. I mean, you have like the Berne Convention, like the Berne Convention, the Madrid Protocol, I'm just talking about trademark stuff.
Sure.
Digital Millennium Copyright Act, you have the American Invents Act, you have all of this stuff that happens. And it seems now we're at a point where it's like, goodness, are we going to see legislation anytime soon on anything? Can we get our government to agree? But we need to have people in the room who are grappling with these problems for their clients to talk about them and help us develop what the best policies and laws are, so that we can, protect IP and protect innovation and all those great things that the association stands for.
Well, you're absolutely right, and you know, you you can also add the Supreme Court's outside interest in intellectual property rights over the last 15, yeah, 15 maybe, oh, close to 20 years now.
Yeah,
Uh, and you know, but I think that's a recognition of the fact that, you know, intellectual property is the economic driver.
yes, it is. It totally is. Um, and
So go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
I
cut
was
you.
no, I was going to say that just like the amicus brief committee alone does a tremendous job keeping on top of percolating issues. So you watch cases and you follow them, and when there's an opportunity to weigh in, the process is a robust one that has debates on the committee and involves activity of whatever the subject matter expert committee might be,
Yep.
and before it gets to the board for proposals to be approved. And it's a well-run process, and the people who are willing to take the time that it takes to write a brief for the association really should be commended for the work that they put in, because the output is usually excellent.
Well, you're one of them. So,
Yeah.
you know, you've done quite a bit of work too. Um, and, you know, lest anyone think that we're just IP geeks when it comes to amicus briefs. So no, we get to talk about First Amendment issues,
Right.
administrative law issues, and, you know, constitutional issues. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite enjoyable. All right, so before we get into specifics about your presidency, can you give a general overview of the IP landscape in terms of the issues confronting the IP community at the time, during the time that you were president?
It's probably some of the same issues that we're seeing today. It's just technology is developing so quickly, and sometimes it takes a while for the courts and the legislature and the community to sort of figure out, what's the fair way to address whatever the issue is. And we're seeing that now with AI. And I think back at the time, like the issue that I did the President's Forum on back in that time was platform liability.
That's right.
So we had this session where we had Judge Sullivan from the Second Circuit, who wrote the decision when he was a district court judge in the Southern District of New York in the Tiffany versus eBay case that was addressing counterfeit Tiffany products that are sold on the eBay platform. And it was a big issue at the time, and it's I don't know how old the case is. I haven't looked it up lately, but it's old, right? I mean, it's like it was at the beginning,
Yeah.
the whole eBay and Amazon things. And these platforms have evolved. And there were procedures that had to be put in place for notice and takedown. But the debate continues, like, is notice and takedown enough? Do the platforms need to do more to make sure that, infringing products or counterfeits are not sold? And that issue, which we struggle with for IP, sort of morphs over a little bit into even things like product liability. When you think about it, if you buy a product from an online platform that's defective and causes you bodily injury, but you can't find out who the seller is because even the platform doesn't know, can you sue the platform? I mean, these are big issues that we were talking about those issues in 2019 when I had the President's Forum, and now fast forward to 2024, and we're still talking about those issues, but we're also seeing like something is going to happen with how we access information and maybe how we buy things, right, over the next coming years in interesting ways that I don't think we've fully thought out sort of who should be responsible. I remember in law school, my torts class, I had kind of an experimental professor who taught me nothing about the tort rules, like proximate cause and all that stuff. I didn't know any of that. We just sat around and debated how society should allocate the blame for, the sequence of events that led to somebody's injury. And I don't know. I don't know that was a disservice. I had to learn it all for the bar exam. Um, but we're
Well,
still grappling with those issues. How should society allocate the economics, the blame, whatever you want to call it, for bad things that happen with platforms, with new technologies, with IP rights infringement. And then you mix in there, and we saw this last year with the Supreme Court case, you mix in there the concept of free speech, parody, for copyright, like everything's derivative, but is it a parody? Is it a fair use? All those issues are still kicking around.
yeah. Well, certainly the platform liability issue that's still kicking around, I
Yeah,
think speaks to a couple of things, not the least of which is the power that these platforms have.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that gets into competition too, right? I mean, part of trademarks like grew out of unfair competition law. So
Yeah.
you're always talking about what's fair, what's unfair, what's confusing, what's not confusing. And yeah, there's a lot that goes on with a huge technology company that you wonder if AI is going to make it easier or harder for competition, for the new startup to come up with the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm a little cynical about generative AI, but I'm always looking at it from the perspective of the Wizard of Oz. Who's pulling the levers?
Yeah, I was looking at a trademark searching platform that was AI, and there was an element to it that was like that, where as the lawyer, you want to, they gave you like some spiffy report that said all you put in was like a few basic bits of information that gives you this spiffy report with like some like 70% risk number or something. I don't know. I don't think, but if I can't explain why the mark is clear or not, or what was done to behind the scenes do the searching. Whereas otherwise, in the platforms I'm on now, I pick the class, the goods. I can see the analysis that went into the searching parameters. It's a little bit easier for me to say it's clear, it's not clear.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But if you listen to Hard Fork, some of the people on there, there's a lot of the stuff that's coming out that is very good right now, and it's very good for high school students to write their term papers. Let's put it that way. What else it's going to do, I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, I think, there's also quite a bit of hype. The other interesting thing about the AI boom, for lack of a better phrase, is, unlike other technology advancements, it's you cannot escape it. No one can escape it, right? It's completely transcended any kind of categories or anything. It's everywhere. Let's put it that. It's so ubiquitous. Everyone's talking about it, and that's a little frightening because when everyone's talking about something, sometimes logic and truth just go out the window.
Well, the other thing that they talk about, I mean, Hard Fork seems to be a little positive about the ability of AI to do things that are helpful, and concerned about AI doing things that are bad, right? But they also talk a lot about the silliness or the what they see, at least these two authors, of like crypto and the metaverse and NFTs. So
Yeah.
there are all these things that become hot buzzwords, and people have like a fear of missing out, so they decide they're gonna, jump on the bandwagon of having an NFT, and then after a while, you're like, wait a second, this thing,
I have an address
this thing is not
in the
anything.
cyberspace.
Yeah.
Wow, I
Yeah.
can't believe I'm rich.
I mean, in the sense I get, and I could be wrong, but the sense I get is that AI technology will be transformative in several ways, in a manner that I don't think crypto or NFTs or the metaverse necessarily will be. But I could be wrong. That's my prediction. That's my prediction.
Yeah, well, and I look at it from, right now, I'll stick with the Ouija board and the magic 8 ball.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and but in all seriousness, I tend to agree with you, and I think there are certain applications for artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence that are absolutely spectacular.
right.
But then, as with many things, right, a large segment of the population will just waste precious time asking AI, what should I wear tonight?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or filing briefs in court that have fake cases in it.
Oh Lord, oh, there would be no way to run and hide, right?
No, no, and it's bad. It's just at that point, I think you just got to hang it up. If that's what
Yeah,
you're
right.
doing.
Yeah, absolutely,
Given up.
absolutely.
You've
It,
given up.
you give it up. Yeah, it reminds me what I had this one case, and I forget what issue we were briefing, and the judge stopped during oral argument, and he says to my adversary, "Your cases are a joke." It's like, oh, all right, I'll stop talking.
Right, right, right.
All right, well, we'll get back on track here, but this is enjoyable anyway.
Yeah.
So can you provide a general overview of the various tasks and responsibilities you were charged with during your presidency?
I had to learn what are they, the Roberts rules? So I could run a meeting and make sure that resolutions got properly motioned and passed. Um, I had to pick a speaker for the judges' dinner,
Yeah.
right? Which was like such uh, a difficult decision, right? You have to you want to try to get somebody who can minimize the need for the professional shusher to come on and shush the the 2,000 IP attorneys and judges who've been drinking for 2 hours. And then you want someone to be, related to intellectual property in some way. And I don't know, that was hard. So you have to pick you have to run the annual meeting, and you have to help sort of guide the committee process to make sure people are moving forward with projects and keeping the calendar, full of events to get people out there. Um, that was it. That was the general overview. And I do think, that for me, what became the crisis moment was, February 2020, as we're starting to learn about the coronavirus and how sick people are getting, and how the doctors and hospitals don't really know much about what's happening, or how to avoid it, really, or how, the thought of having, you know, I don't know, 100 federal judges in a big ballroom in March 2020. And
Eyeball to eyeball.
yeah, and then you're at the point where you're like, what does it say about force majeure in our contract with the Hilton.
That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
there was all sorts of, and then kind of trying to figure out what's the timing, what's the messaging, what do we tell people who are planning their trips and trying to figure out, are they coming to New York in March 2020 for the dinner, or are they not doing it? And timing that with, I have to say, then Governor Cuomo stepped up at just the right time to sort of make the decision, not my decision.
Yeah. No, it's true.
We were not having the dinner. We couldn't do it, which was actually necessary to get to that point under the law or the contract provisions. So that the timing there worked out in my favor. But that was kind of the big thing. And then the spin from that, right? Was like, okay, how do we help people in our membership? Like, how do we keep people engaged? How do we, what do people need to know about? How can we help? And so we pivoted and did online things.
Yeah.
And then Coleman stepped up in May. We had the annual meeting virtually. Passing the gavel. There you go.
Yeah.
I think they had to get a new gavel, because was there only one that would, or do you get to keep your gavel? I guess you get to keep your gavel.
Yeah, I think you do. I think
Yeah.
I don't recall, but I think my name is on it. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who wants a Rob Rando gavel?
Yeah. So that was really it. I think the mission and the goal that I had was really to get more people involved in the association. Just not only like more members, but more people showing up at meetings and providing a point of view. I think the more points of views you have in the room, the better off you are. So that was kind of, my September or whatever, my first missive as president in the bulletin was something along the lines of, I hope to see you and say hello to you and find out how we can help at our, the next event.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I guess I won't be seeing you in person, but we can still, connect and talk and figure out ways to just overall help the IP community. And that's kind of what we pivoted to.
Yeah, no, and so you've actually, moved to that next question about your mission and goals. And that was a different world when you set out with that mission and goal. And I mean, I can just say from my own personal experience being on the board at the time that you were president, you did a fantastic job during the most trying times of keeping the association together, keeping it active, maintaining interaction, all virtual during hellish period of time in everyone's lives.
They had me start doing video messages that I would do, and I have I have all these video messages on my phone. I think I need to delete some of them, but there are a lot that are bloopers. Let's put it that way. There are a lot of bloopers, but that was hard. That was a challenge. But I do think that's probably, I think the next question has to do with a greatest accomplishment was just to keep it moving through there, right? Keep it together, keep it moving. And that was also my greatest challenge, was really COVID. Yeah, like my favorite memory actually. I was looking, I don't know if this counts because it wasn't necessarily my turn, but in 2021, we did a virtual dinner, Coleman and I together, and I had arranged through a connection of my brother's to get some Broadway singers from the Hamilton production to come on and provide the entertainment for this virtual dinner we had. And I thought they were fantastic. I mean, I thought they were really good. So that was a connection I had. I have a brother who's a stand-up comedian and knows some, entertainment folks. And it was like a win-win situation because these singers, talented as they are, have nowhere to sing.
Yeah.
Right. We need something that's engaging and fun, but it can't, I don't know, you can't, there's only so much you can do, with a virtual dinner. But they came out and they did some songs and they were really good.
Yep.
Um,
That's right.
so that was probably my fondest memory. I thought that was a lot of fun.
So let me ask you, what advice can you give younger or newer members of NYIPLA if they aspire to assume a leadership role or one day maybe even become president of NYIPLA?
Well, I think you have to show up, right? They get back to Aaron Sorkin. You have to show up. You have, and you don't have to take on a ton of work, but if there's, we have like in our committee meetings, usually there's an agenda and there's like a call for volunteers. Would somebody be willing to look at this case and give us a little presentation about what happened at our next meeting? Raise your hand. It's a good opportunity for you to read a case, look at something, and then practice speaking about it in a very safe environment, like no judgment, no judgment. We're all just here to talk and learn. And it's a really good opportunity, I think, to just step up. So show up, join a committee, and volunteer. And the volunteering can be a small little thing. You don't have to write an amicus brief your first time you raise your hand. But if you come across it, the other thing that I've found really, really helpful is when I have something that I've been working on for a particular case, and there's an issue that that is still kind of unclear to you, and you've done some research. Well, sometimes that research that you've done can turn into an article in the bulletin, can turn into a presentation at at one of the CLE programs that we have, can turn into, or can just turn into you talking about it at a committee meeting and somebody giving you a good idea or a recommendation that you hadn't thought of before. I can't tell you, like showing up and being curious are probably the most important qualities for our younger members. Because if you're showing up and you're curious about what's going on, you're going to learn something and it'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, you really identified great advice for younger and newer people, if they want to assume leadership roles in NYIPLA. And I think you've also described how young new members can derive benefit from their membership, or derive the most benefit. Is there anything else you could add to that?
Yeah, go to the events too, because I think one of the things about going to the events is you will find, the first time you go, it might be a little scary if you walk into a room and you don't really know anybody there. Well, the best thing for you to do is if you're working at a firm where there's other people, drag somebody with you so you can come with somebody else. But you will find over time, now when I walk into a room at an event, even if I didn't check with anybody in advance who's going to be there, whatnot, there's somebody there I know from NYIPLA. And it's very, very helpful to your career to just meet and know and talk to other people who are in the same geographic region, working on the same type of law. You just kind of never know somebody that you meet at one of these events might be the next person you're interviewing for a job. It has tremendous networking benefits as well. And that's something that I think I haven't really mentioned yet, but it definitely, I can remember when I came to King and Spalding 17 years ago, somebody here told, somebody from the NYIPLA, somebody that I knew from NYPLA called one of the partners here and said all sorts of nice things about me. So I was starting out with, and totally unsolicited, right? I mean, I just was just like, oh, I saw that you guys hired Katie McCarthy, you know, good on you. I've known her from the trade, you know, it was great. It was like nice. And it was one of those things where by being there, by showing up, by engaging with people, by knowing people, by meeting them and chatting with them, and then volunteering for different things, you get to the point where people say, I know that person.
Yeah.
I trust that person, you know, that person, or even just things like, and this has happened as well, where somebody says, hey, I've got this client with a trademark issue, you know, somebody that I knew from the NYIPLA who's at a firm that doesn't do trademark work. Would you be willing to talk to this person to see if you can, you know, if you can help them with their problem? So it's not only your own job advancement, but also potential client connections that you can get through the opportunities the association presents through its meetings and committees.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really hit on the significant benefits of membership, especially for younger people, you know, like career development, networking, and, you know, as you mentioned, making presentations is excellent opportunity for new practitioners or young people to get comfortable, and NYIPLA provides that opportunity to get, you know, to get comfortable with making presentations and speaking on topics. And I love the way you say show up and be serious, because that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, this has been a delightful session. It really has. I've enjoyed the direction. We will have a conversation about you around the world in 1 year. I'm very intrigued. Hopefully you'll be able to make the past president's dinner on the 15th.
Yes,
Okay,
look forward to that.
that'd be great. I'm going to corner you about that round the world trip. But, you know, as we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts?
No, you know, I do think this association is here to stay, and it does great things. And it really, I encourage all the younger folks that I do some mentoring programs through the Leadership Council for Legal Diversity and other things. And they hook me up with people who are interested in IP. And my first question usually is, are you a member of the NYIPLA? If you can put on your resume, you're a member of the NYIPLA, and you go to the committees and you do this kind of stuff, that's a step up. That shows me you're not just saying you're interested in intellectual property because theoretically it kind of sounds interesting. That shows me you're interested.
Yeah, no, you know, it's funny. I just had that conversation. I try to do a lot of mentoring as well, and I just had that conversation with a law student, and I said something similar, although I like the way you said it better than I did. But I told him, I said, you know, you don't realize, or you will realize that you may be interviewing for a position, and if there's a practitioner that sees on your resume, you know, student member of NYIPLA, there's an immediate connection.
Right, right, right.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kathleen. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your willingness to do it. And on top of that, you had to deal with two randos in one day.
Yeah, I know, I know. All right,
I look forward to seeing you in February. Take care.
thanks. Bye.